All right, 1 minute, everybody. We're starting at 1:30. It's a long agenda, so if everybody could find their seat so we can get started in like 20 seconds. Okay, we're going to get started now, so I'm going to call us to order, please. I'm having a little bit of fun with my computer, so I'm going to go old-fashioned and use the documents here. So we will start, Mr. Westerson, with a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Here.
Councillor Middleton Hope. Here.
And
Councillor Dodick. You can see that. Councillor Dodick.
slacker.
He's not here. Councillor Crowson.
Here.
I can see two members of council have joined us online, Councillor Carlson and Mayor Higgin, pardon me.
Perfect. So we do have quorum, so I will call us to order and start with the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. We begin with the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion from Councillor Middleton Hope. Be it resolved that the agenda of the Governance Standing Policy Committee meeting of June 27, 2024 be adopted as presented. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Chair. Unless there are any alterations to it, Mr. Clerk? No?
There are none.
Any other questions from my colleagues? None? Call the question then.
Question's been called. All in favor? That passes unanimously. I have now a motion regarding the consent agenda from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Governance Standing Policy Committee meeting held on May 23rd, 2024 be approved and the Chair and City Clerk Designate be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that the status of initiatives for June 27, 2024 be received as information. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
If none of my colleagues had any changes or questions to the consent agenda, I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Passes unanimously as well. Moving us then to our presentations, and we have 4 presentations today. Before we do, I just want to remind everybody that this is a standing policy committee. As an SPC, members of the public will be invited to speak on any agenda item. When speaking, please address all questions, comments, etc. to the committee and not to staff or any members of the public. Every person will have a maximum of 5 minutes. You must provide your name for the record so Mr. Westerson and the City Clerk's Department can make sure they go into the permanent record. I will not permit any libel against any members of administration or members of the public during presentations. If there is any, you will be given 1 warning, and if I have to give a second warning, the microphone will be turned off and the presentation will be ended at that point. All right, let us begin there. Our first presentation is Trevor Lewington, CEO, Economic Development Lethbridge, on Team Lethbridge. Welcome, Mr. Lewington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak to you today. Go to the next slide. We have an update on Team Lethbridge, as I believe there were some questions coming from this body, and I'm happy to give you a bit of an overview. If we can go to the next one. So Team Lethbridge, of course, was an initiative that started in 2008. You can see that we go to Edmonton roughly every other year. The current mission plan for the fall of this year will be mission number 8. There are 19 participating organizations in this particular mission, and you can see that number has ebbed and flowed as organizations come and go from the organization. A couple of pictures on the left there. We'll go to the next slide. Advocacy, as you know, really follows three streams. So, of course, we want to talk to elected officials, so specifically ministers, but associate ministers and parliamentary secretaries can be influential. And this government in particular has embedded a number of caucus MLAs into both cabinet and caucus committees. So it's important to also speak to MLAs. Political staff, of course, set the agenda differently from the bureaucracy. So it's important that we have access to chiefs of staff, policy advisors, ministerial assistants. And of course, the bureaucracy itself, typically deputy ministers, ADMs, and other program staff are often in those meetings. So it's three parallel pathways with different messaging, all to advance the brand of Lethbridge and address community issues. We'll go to the next one. It is also nonpartisan. So you can see their endorsement statements from both current MLAs till at least next week. And historically, we've always had both MLAs part of the mission. They're part of the planning meetings. They attend the receptions. And they're very much a huge support to us in terms of getting our message in Edmonton. And we make sure they're both involved equally. We all know that governments come and go, and governments change, as do political parties. And so it's important to ensure that Lethbridge's message transcends any specific party and is there for the long term. We'll go to the next one. I think a common misconception is that, Team Lethbridge is government advocacy in all things and all forms, and that's simply not the case. Team Lethbridge is a community initiative. It is the introduction for some organizations. It's about relationship building. It only occurs every 2 years. So the things that you see on the left are what distinguish, I think, what is ongoing advocacy and government relations work that happens on the right. They are complementary but not supplementary. Team Lethbridge is meant to boost smaller organizations that maybe don't have the same access. It is also meant to reinforce messages for those organizations that have very strong relationships. And so the best example I can give you of that was the Destination Project from the university. The University of Lethbridge, of course, had great relationships with the provincial government, but when you had a number of other community organizations actually repeating the same message and speaking on the university's behalf, it was quite an impactful visit, and I think part of the success of that mission, and that's the university's perspective as well. So again, there is a distinction. This is part of an overall government relations strategy. Team Lethbridge is but one component. Go to the next one. We do ask our members, of course, because ultimately this is about what they want. And you can see here that most people thought it was either highly effective or somewhat effective in terms of, do you feel like Team Lethbridge did the mission accomplish its goals? And if you go to the next one, 100% of the people that answered the survey believed that we should go again. And we, of course, after every mission, we follow up with our members to understand whether or not they found value for their contribution and whether or not they would support doing it again. So that's why we're going again. If you go to the next slide. There's another misconception, and hopefully everyone in the room is old enough to recognize the reference. There's a misconception sometimes that this is EDL's mission. That is simply not true. Our role is literally that of cruise director. So Julie is my name tag. The whole purpose of the reason we do this is we help organize the messaging, we help collate the messages, we help, the logistics of scheduling the meetings. But this is not an Economic Development Lethbridge project. This is not an Economic Development Lethbridge brochure. We are there simply to do the back-end work and make the project successful. If we go to the next one. These are the goals from 2022. They're currently being revised, so each mission takes a slightly different form and shape. And of course, the membership met at the end of May to coalesce around what our goals and objectives are. But ultimately, it's to promote the fact that there is something south of Calgary that the provincial government should pay attention to. We want to make sure that we're appreciative of the investments we do receive, so we reinforce the successes we've had. We actively look for new partnerships with provincial government departments. One of our key messages has always been the Lethbridge is a great sized community in which to do pilot projects. And I think the last bullet point is perhaps one of the most important. It's also an opportunity to reinforce relationships within the Team Lethbridge members themselves. So it's not often that you get 30 to 50 community and business leaders together in a confined space for up to 3 days. And a lot of the conversation on the bus and in the hallway and part of the mission is building the strength and connectivity between community organizations. Go to the next one. Our key messages, again, these are being revised based on feedback from the group as we prepare for 2024. But when we went last time, we talked about the fact that Lethbridge is collaborative in place. That's why pilots work well here. We recognize that we're open to businesses that maybe do things differently, and that we're proud of the many diverse traditions and cultures and things that we have in Lethbridge. And again, when we're meeting with the entire government caucus or the opposition caucus, when we're hosting those receptions, we do our best to educate folks that maybe perhaps have not spent a lot of time or any time in Lethbridge about why we're different and why we should be on their radar. We'll go to the next one. And just an example of some of the outcomes, this is from the last mission. We did manage to meet with 19 different departments over the 3 days while we were there, in most cases with the minister. Often the DM is in the room. We did also have a meeting with the official opposition, one particular critic. We hosted the 2 caucus receptions, and we also managed to squeeze in a meeting with Prairie's Economic Development Canada. So it can be, for those ministers that choose to leverage the opportunity, a very effective way for them to also connect with a bunch of groups all at the same time and hear consistent messaging. One of the things that came out of the last mission was the feasibility grant for the Rural Physician Training Program, which ultimately led to a much larger capital investment. Again, we were able to reinforce as a community across multiple organizations the significance and importance of that investment. The Rural Renewal Stream, which we've been very successful launching here last year in Lethbridge under the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, came out of some ministerial discussions of, hey, has Lethbridge thought about this? And that prompted us to do some more research. And more recently, there's been an expansion of dual credit pathways between the education system and post-secondary institutions, which was a discussion 2 years ago in that particular meeting, and that's borne fruit as well. There are many other examples, but those are some of the tangible things that have come out of past missions. If we go to the next one. And what we're advocating for this year, we did a pretty comprehensive membership survey. We've asked Team Lethbridge participating organizations to understand what are the capital projects they believe are the priority for our community. What does that look like? What are some of the operating funding envelopes that perhaps, inside of existing ministry budgets, should they be evaluated? What are policy considerations? Because of course, not everything relates to money. So what can we advocate for from a policy standpoint? And then is there anything else? And so we're currently compiling that feedback that we received from the group, pulling out the themes, and that will inform our next planning meeting before the group goes. So it's October the 28th is when the group next meets to finally assemble all of we actually pre-script those ministerial meetings, and we'll weave in all of these things that the group has identified as priorities for the community that we want to communicate to the provincial government. So that's the quick and dirty overview. I know most of you are very familiar with Team Lethbridge, but like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions that the group had to help you with your decision-making process.
Thank you, Mr. Lewington. I'm sure there will be questions, but first we'll see if there's anyone in the public who wishes to speak on this topic. Is there anyone in the public here to speak on 5.1, Team Lethbridge? Okay. It doesn't appear there is, so we will go to questions now. So are there any questions from members of the committee? All right, well, I have a question for you. Are there any other communities that are doing this, thinking of doing this, or is this a Lethbridge thing, or is it every community does this?
There are very few communities that do this, actually. Grand Prairie has tried. Their last mission consisted of 6 individuals. We've received feedback from a number of ministers over the years on both sides of the political spectrum that this is a very powerful way to connect with government, that it has a big impact when we're there in such a large delegation. And Lethbridge is known for being the only community that does it in this way and does it successfully.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Councillor Middleton Hope had a question, but it doesn't look like he does. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lewington, for coming out and for addressing for the situation. So when we were putting this together, I decided to write up the motion for this because, one, I'm aware you have to have all the names in for Team Lethbridge by tomorrow so that they can be vetted through the provincial government. So there is a bit of a time crunch. And based on who's been attending training and stuff, I put this together. It is a straw motion. So if there is conversation, of course, from my colleagues, we can work on it. But this was put forward for discussion. Be it resolved that the governance standing policy and that City Council accept the Team Lethbridge presentation for information, and confirm Mayor Blaine Higgin and Councillor Schmidt-Rempel as the Lethbridge City Council members for this year's Team Lethbridge. So that is the motion on the floor. Any conversation around, as I said, the straw motion? Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Chair.
All right.
The microphones
You're
take a
back
little
on
bit of
now.
getting used to. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. You've provided some additional information that was not available prior to our meeting today. I have an alternate motion, as this is my motion, so I brought forward an alternate motion, which basically takes out the two names and provides other members of council, should they choose to have an interest in this, to bring their names forward. What you're telling me today is that, in fact, we're under a time crunch. These are the two names that you selected because they've expressed interest in the past, and I don't have any umbrage. I take no umbrage whatsoever with either one of the members. I just thought it was an opportunity for any member, and there are a couple of members that have been on council for quite a number of years, have not gone on this mission before, and might want to. I being one of them, I certainly would have an interest, but I recognize in terms of the time crunch that we're under, that you've placed two names on there. Both of them will do an excellent job, so I will withdraw my amended motion and we can move forward.
Yes, sorry, I should have explained how I created that straw motion in the start. All right, so this is your motion then, Councillor Middleton Hope, if you wish to accept it.
Well, yes, and not the other one, which was also mine. Thank you.
You wish
So,
to-
yeah, unless there's any debate, then I'll just call the question, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Question's been called. All in favor? Excellent. Now I just hope at the next council meeting, they will confirm a decision we've already made for them. Yeah, not the best way of doing it. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Lewington. Have fun with the 125th out in Sterling, and I'm sure we'll see you around. All right, moving to Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan. Ms. Parker, General Manager, Waste and Environment, will be, are you presenting on Ms. Parker, or is there one of your staff who's doing that, or is there, oh, there's a group of you, awesome. Please come on up and the floor is yours. Yeah, Ms. Parker has an entourage today.
Thank you. Rain Barber was not able to attend, and so Mark and I are going to fill in for her on some of the questions, but I wanted to introduce Twyla from Associated Engineering. She'll be doing the presentation.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Sure.
So as we have time, by show of hands, who's going to RibFest? And who's going to Canada Day? I don't know. I'm in Canada. And who's doing Fort Macleod's 150th? Okay. I don't know what everybody else is doing, but this is a busy weekend. Oh, well, I hope you're going to your own birthday. All right, are we set, Mr. Westerson? All right, the floor is once again yours.
All right, thank you. Once again, my name is Twyla Kwelzik. I'm with Associated Engineering, here representing the project. We're here to talk today about the Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, also known as the CASEP. So I'll refer to the CASEP throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. The CASEP aligns with the Lethbridge NDP, specifically Policy 155, which indicates the city should create a climate adaptation plan for the community. It is our responsibility to prepare for climate and extreme weather events and protect our community from high climate risks. The CASEP looks to add an environmental lens to the decision-making at the city. There will be costs associated with climate change, and the CASEP helps to guide proactive investment to reduce long-term economic impact. Next slide. Today, we will provide an overview of the project and outline the administrative recommendation. Next slide. To ensure that we are all speaking the same language, the terms on the slide were used throughout the project and the plan. The CASEP focuses on climate adaptation and resilience, ensuring that we are prepared to respond to and recover from climate hazards. The project does not focus on greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. Lethbridge has seen numerous extreme weather events in the recent past, ranging from flooding to drought to extreme heat. These events will become more severe and will occur more frequently with climate change. The CASEP builds off existing work that the city has done and helps us target efforts towards the highest climate risks for Lethbridge. Next slide, please. Understanding where we are going in terms of climate projections is critical to proactively plan and adapt to climate change. For example, future generations will see approximately 3 times more days above 30 degrees Celsius in the summer months. Next slide. This work is important because there are costs associated with climate change. Doing nothing is not free. This slide highlights that inaction could cost the city and community on an annual basis. The key takeaway is the rate of change and magnitude of change over time. By the 2050s, costs will have grown to 3 times larger than today, and by 2085, it will be 9 times larger. Proactive investment today will reduce the projected costs shown here. Next slide. The CASEP was informed by many different types of assessments as shown on the screen. The actions presented in the CASEP are actions to be taken by the City of Lethbridge over the next 10 years. Next slide. Engagement was conducted throughout the process, from developing vision and principles to co-creating adaptation actions. We would not be successful without the help from internal and external stakeholders. The graphic on this slide and the What We Heard report includes more detail around the engagement of this plan. Overall, there was a positive response from stakeholders and the public to be involved and to see this work move forward. Next slide. The vision of the plan is to be a thriving, climate-resilient community. The guiding principles can be used throughout the organization for climate action. Next slide. A risk and vulnerability assessment was completed for the community, and although Lethbridge is at risk of all of the hazards shown on the screen, the highest risks on the left-hand side are the focus of the actions for the CASEP. Next slide. 33 priority actions in the CASEP are grouped into 8 themes, which were developed in collaboration with our stakeholders, industry experts, and data. Each theme has a goal, indicator, target, and associated actions. Implementation details are included in the final CASEP report. Next slide. I'll very at a high level go through each of the themes. So theme 1 is focused on climate leadership and collaboration. Theme 2 is related to expanding our internal emergency preparedness for additional hazards. Next slide. Theme 3 is preparing the broader community for climate hazards. Theme 4 strengthens our critical infrastructure that is already in place. Next slide. Theme 5 ensures future designs consider climate projections. Theme 6 is around water conservation. Next slide. Theme 7 increases the resilience of our natural landscape. And theme 8 is focused on environmental conservation. Next slide. Waste and Environment will coordinate the CASEP, but other departments will be involved in leading and implementing the actions. Council should expect to see requests through the budget planning process. Next slide. The administration recommendation is to adopt the CASAP as a guiding document and to direct administration to return to ENFSPC for approval of CASAP actions requiring changes in budget or service level. We are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Like the last agenda item, we'll now open it to the public, so if you guys want to take a seat, I am sure there will be questions after that. Some people have signed up to speak. I'm just going to wait for Mr. Westerson because he has the magic list. I will remind everybody that there is a maximum of 5 minutes, and please address all comments to the committee. Okay, maybe he doesn't have the magic list.
I'll get one. I hope I didn't walk away with it.
All right. So when we have people who have signed up to speak, we start with those who have signed up, and then we open it to the public. So the first person on the list is Ms. Joan McNeil. So Ms. McNeil, if you'd like to come up, please. Welcome. The floor is yours. And as I said, you have 5 minutes. And I believe you do have a slideshow. Is it queued up? Oh. That's not first. Okay. So.
Do I have a clicker?
Yeah, they'll just get the technology ready for you, and then we'll begin. Now I'm very curious what everybody is doing for the weekend if you're not doing any of the big events. Yeah, I'm very nosy. Oh, yes, well, Councillor Rempel is doing rocket launching, but that's because, that's one of the things she does.
Thank you.
I'm gardening. All right. Are we good for technology? Okay, please begin.
My name is Joan McNeil. I grew up in Alberta and I have lived in Lethbridge for 35 years. I completed a Bachelor of Science at the University of Alberta and a Master's degree in Hydrogeology at the University of Waterloo. I am here to make 7 specific recommendations regarding the CASAP report and the Lethbridge climate strategy. For my main recommendation, I have brought a petition of support signed by 75 Lethbridge residents. I fully support any initiatives that are good for the environment and the people of Lethbridge, but I don't support strategies and plans that are developed under the direction of the United Nations. I'm not sure, is this working? Global warming is mentioned only once in the CASAP report. Otherwise, the focus is entirely on the need to adapt to extreme weather. The evidence provided for this extreme weather consists of a few examples of wind, heat, drought, and flooding. I looked at detailed weather data for Lethbridge to see how extreme it's actually become. Wind speed is shown from 1971 on the left to 2023 on the right, and I don't see a detectable increase in extreme winds. If anything, it looks like there are fewer winds after about 1994. This graph shows the hottest temperatures for June, July, and August in red, and the coldest temperatures for December, January, and February in blue, going from 1902 on the left to 2023 on the right. The trends suggest there are an increasing number of hot days in summer, most notably in August. It looks like the coldest winter temperatures are not as cold as they used to be, suggesting that the winters are getting milder, not more extreme. A doubling of atmospheric carbon dioxide will cause some increase in the mean global temperature. Many scientists say the increase should be no more than 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius at most, while the United Nations International Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, uses a higher carbon dioxide-induced warming of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. Our climate fluctuates naturally in response to changes in the Earth's orbit, and carbon dioxide levels rise naturally in response to the warming. This slide shows 2 different warming periods that occurred over a time span of 51 years. Can anyone guess which graph is from before 1950 and which is from after 1950? Despite the fact of the naturally changing climate, the UN IPCC is set up so that scientists must consider all warming to be the result of human emissions. The City of Lethbridge climate strategy, which appears to be a cookie-cutter approach from the United Nations organization called ICLEI, is based on a computer-modeled risk assessment. For an input parameter, they used the RCP 8.5 emissions scenario, even though that scenario is highly unlikely even according to the IPCC. It would require, among other things, burning twice the amount of coal reserves on the entire planet. An increase in coal use hardly squares with the situation in Alberta, where coal use has decreased from 81% of our energy in 2001 to only 6% or less today. The risk model with RCP 8.5 predicts a drastic rise in extreme heat. This graph shows the number of days over 30 degrees Celsius for Lethbridge dating back to 1902, averaging the values over decades to highlight trends. The graph suggests there are more hot days after 2000, but it looks unlikely that we will reach the 54 days predicted by the risk assessment. Unfortunately, we all know we are in a bad drought. You can see the current drought is much worse than anything experienced in the 1930s. The Partners for Climate Protection Program, or PCP, was set up by the United Nations, which is a global, unelected, privately funded organization to administer the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 21. The City of Lethbridge signed on to the PCP program in 2007. Our municipal development plans and climate strategies are now drafted under the direction of the PCP. Under the PCP program, our city committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% from 2018 levels by 2030, with the goal of achieving net zero by 2050. Do you think we can meet these reductions without a major reduction in our quality of life? We managed a 12% reduction by 2022, but we have a long way to go. Alberta has already phased out coal, and even with 57% backing by natural gas, we almost had a blackout during the cold weather last winter. Lethbridge plans to spend a lot of money on switching to electric vehicles, which they mistakenly call zero-emissions vehicles. Lifetime emissions from high-efficiency gas vehicles can be lower than those from electric vehicles. Even this city calculation from 2021 indicates there are much more efficient ways to reduce our emissions. The potential for solar and wind to replace conventional fuels, or even to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, has been greatly exaggerated. Why are we exaggerating the potential of alternative energy? Follow the money. Climate change is big business. We would all do well to look into the carbon credit scheme, which has been called the biggest scam ever to be visited on mankind. The CASEP report relies heavily on a cost of inaction analysis. Where is the cost of action analysis? The proposed actions seem generally reasonable, but words don't always mean what they say when dealing with UN agendas. I wonder if the vulnerable would prefer jobs and houses rather than the ability to access temporary emergency shelters. I also object to the top-down education and public engagement components of all the Lethbridge climate reports. City public engagement generally involves presenting participants with an exaggerated risk assessment and the opportunity to rank a list of pre-selected priorities. I have 7 recommendations. 5 are listed on this slide and 2 on the next 2 slides. External funding comes with external strings attached. We should carefully examine the real costs of using these grants, stop carrying out UN agendas, and prioritize actions that promote our local people, economy, and environment. The Partners for Climate Protection Program declares that they are not responsible for the milestones of data harvesting.
Ms. McNeil, 5 minutes are up, so if you could wrap up, please.
Yep, I'm just about done. And energy reduction they are imposing. The authors of the CASEP report declare they are not responsible for anything they say. So who is responsible? Did you know that the County of Thorhold in Ontario recently voted to not adopt the Partners for Climate Protection Program? They did it, and so can you. I hereby recommend that the City of Lethbridge rescind their 2007 resolution to adopt the voluntary Partners for Climate Protection Program. Then we can focus on local initiatives designed to benefit the people, the environment, and the economy of our beautiful city. I have a petition here with 75 local signatures in support of rescinding the Partners for Climate Protection Program.
Thank you very much, Ms. McNeil. Right. Oh, we do not clap, please. There is no clapping in council chambers. All right, move on to Anthony Hall as our next presenter. I believe you have a video. Is the video queued up, Ms. Thompson?
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one.
Just making sure the technology is there.
Wasn't there a procedure to ask questions after?
No, questions are after all presenters.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Thompson, your group is ready?
What do you mean? Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Anthony James Hall. I am Professor Emeritus at the University of Lethbridge. And I want to start by saying I hereby recommend that the City of Lethbridge rescind its resolution made in 2007 to be voluntary partners in the Climate Protection Program. And I want to add that the report of this standing committee disappoints me a lot. When Joan McNeil says it's cookie cutter of thousands of such reports. This is template made to look as if it applies specifically to Lethbridge, but I've seen so much of this kind of report coming from big centralized globalist operations, which leave spaces to make it look global, but the basic wording is repeated again and again. For instance, the idea about wind in September. Well, we happen to live in a place that has Chinooks all the time, and I didn't see any reflection of that. So to start the ball rolling, I'd like to play the tape. This plate is an aspect of climate that isn't much discussed, geoengineering. And when we discuss climate, we have to discuss all elements of it, not just the parts that are convenient to those in power and want to make money from this, like the secret geoengineering programs, which Bill Gates is pushing to stop climate change by filling the sky with chemicals to bounce off the heat and light. Take it away.
Bill Gates is backing the first
Turn it up,
high-altitude
please.
experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive
Can you
chemical
turn it up?
cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial.
How long will it be that countries keep experiencing these climate impacts before someone gets desperate and says, hey, we need to cool the planet with solar geoengineering?
It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth, but it also comes with significant risks and uncertainties.
Things like mass famine, mass flooding, drought, of kinds that will affect very large populations.
It could weaken monsoons in India, China, and Africa enough to affect crops. It could eradicate blue sky.
You start increasing the amount of diffuse light and you have less direct light, which is the same thing as saying it looks hazy and white.
Okay, is this something being proposed or is this something already going on? And what is the nature of this stuff being sprayed out? Well, it's got aluminum in it, which isn't very good for people, and many chemicals which are not good for people. Now, who is Bill Gates? Bill Gates had a lot to do with another UN agency called the World Trade Organization. In fact, he basically paid for it. And he was behind the whole COVID, masking, lockdown, jabbing thing that we sat in this council chamber and you told us, no, we're just going to listen to AHS. And AHS is part of the World Health Organization operation. And Bill Gates has got a lot of media suggesting that he made a lot of money and his colleagues made a lot of money and has wrought a lot of injury on us. And we couldn't be heard when we tried to call this to your attention, we, the horrible anti-vaxxers. And now look who was right. Look who's getting sick and who didn't get sick. So Bill Gates is representative of a situation where, say if I was to want to participate in this and contribute to this process, This process is essentially helping the Bill Gates operation and others like him who are using the UN and going through you people to deliver stuff that we didn't choose. And I'm aware of my time. I'm going to really try to be as clear as I can in the next few seconds and couple of minutes.
Oh, seconds.
No.
No, your time is up, so please
Yes,
wrap it
and
up.
you cut people off and you don't want to listen from the people because you already have your instructions from the UN.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall.
That's
Your
not
time is done.
acceptable.
Your
And,
time is done. Please shut the microphone off. Your time is finished, please. I know I'm worth staring at, but your time is finished.
I would contribute something of value to the environmental discourse about Aboriginal peoples described in these books and the approach to environment, but my time is up. I respect that. Thank you, Councillor Crowson.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have Ms. Kathleen Shepherd next on our list of speakers. You will have 5 minutes to present. I don't believe you have any technology or anything. Okay, perfect. The floor is yours, Ms. Shepherd.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Crowson and members of the committee. My name is Kathleen Shepherd. I'm the Executive Director with Environment Lethbridge. And I'm here today in support of the Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, as was presented by Ms. Kowalczyk and the Waste and Environment team. I believe the Climate Adaptation Strategy provides a path forward to establish Lethbridge as a thriving climate-resilient city, not just from an environmental perspective, but also for the people and for our economy. As was highlighted in the presentation, we are facing a number of key risks, including drought, as we're all familiar with dealing with over the past few months. Also extreme heat, smoke, and potential risks to our ecosystems and natural assets. This plan provides strategies that will protect our residents from some of the health and other risks that we will be seeing from these risk factors, and will also allow us to protect our parks and urban forests. By planning now, we can adapt to these risks and become resilient for the future. This plan provides a pathway that allows investments in climate adaptation and resiliency to be targeted to our most critical areas. It really has the potential to be a guiding document that will allow us to react in a really proactive way. As Ms. Kowalczyk said, doing nothing is not free. We are at a point where addressing climate change, there are costs that we will have to address whether we decide on action or inaction. And this proposal gives us a good step forward for the actions that we should take. I was engaged throughout the consultations in the development of this plan, as were numerous other community members and organizations. I've been involved in a number of consultations on a number of plans, and I think this is one of the most thorough processes I have been through. Ms. Kowalczyk and her team didn't just sort of provide us with information and ask for comment. She made us work for the different steps that went into the plan. So I think it's really grounded in community engagement and community contributions. I wanted to give a shout out to the Waste and Recycling team, or Waste and Environment team, for their work on this, and particularly Rain Barber, who unfortunately isn't here today. And I would encourage SPC to endorse the plan as a guiding document and to prioritize the actions for funding in future budget deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Next on the list, I have Mr. Fritz, and you do have a slideshow? If I may. Okay. Just let them cue it up, and once they're ready, we'll have you begin. Oh, just a moment. I don't think they quite have it up. We had some difficulty with people online seeing things, so we just want to make sure it's appropriately there. All right, now you may begin.
All right, well, thank you very much. So let's go to the next slide right away so that we can get past the fluff. And I see myself in sort of the role of expert witness. I'm for agency and self-advocacy and very much not stuff handed down from the top. But I've had the incredible opportunity of working from Ontario to British Columbia for the last 30 years and have done what I believe are to be some very amazingly sustainable things, which I think are important to note and important to process as we contemplate and consider the future. I've highlighted 3 items actually on here, but I would like to highlight a 4th. So sustainability through density, geothermal exchange systems, and also number 7, reduced water consumption or lilac pipe, because it's just become so pertinent in Calgary. And then the concept of combined heat and power, number 11. So if we can carry on with the next slide, I'll just explain what sustainability through density is. I was very blessed because people were pushing cars over the coulee edge while I was a baby. And by the time I became an architect, I had this whole escarpment to design buildings on and have designed everything from Grandview over to Pemmican Lodge, which has just been very exciting. And density is, if you were to imagine, and so we've done Grandview, Rio Vista, River Ridge in the next slide, most recently 102 Scenic Drive. But all of these are projects which use very little bit of energy. If I could have the next slide, that really greatly saves on the carbon footprint, on consumption. And the most energy efficient building cities are those that are mid-rise. 6 to 8 stories are actually the most sustainable. And ways that I can explain it is, if we go to the next slide, you'll see in the background probably all of the, to the midpoint of that slide, in terms of the houses, are housed in the apartment buildings that I've done at the edge of town. And the next slide shows just conceptually where heat loss occurs. So you've got heat going out of 4 walls, through the floor, through the roof, whereas in our condominium, you're really dealing only with that one wall to the outdoors. So if we really want to attack this sort of on a global level, the idea would be that we would move people into a higher density. So from a planning policy, I'm forever struggling with planning to try to get projects of higher density approved. Even these ones here were not easily won. They were always controversial. Next. And geo-exchange is now the next topic I want to touch with you for a minute and a half. Next, we have done in Medicine Hat a geo-exchange program where we had to drill, and people always told us, well, these things freeze up in Alberta. Well, we're actually the opposite. We're hotter than anticipated, which means we have surplus heat, and we also have photovoltaics on the roof. Next, please. And we've done through Lethbridge Firms, actually built this building. Next. And very interesting geo-exchange system at Heritage Heights. And we're now looking on this site to create housing for seniors that is absolutely foolproof, where we can activate off the grid with the building, looking after our seniors. You see some photovoltaics, they're actually sponsored. Next slide, by the city. They actually, next slide, contributed to it. This is in Kelowna. It's a combined 6-story and the tower, so in the foreground, the largest geo-exchange system and also the most energy efficient building in North America, well, in Canada, in 2007, the most energy efficient apartment building with geo-exchange. Next, please. And we were found actually by we didn't apply, we actually were found, next slide, by the Natural Resources Canada. Next. And so finally, I'd like to talk about combined heat and power, but I forgot. I wanted to talk also about reduced water consumption. The project that I showed you in Medicine Hat has something called lilac pipe. And we clean water in Canada to the highest degree, and then we flush it down the toilet instantly. It's a very interesting thing. It's 30% of our water. It matches exactly what comes out of our showers and when we brush our teeth. So if we took that water and put it into a lilac pipe, collect it, and use it to flush the toilets, you will save 30% across the board. Just imagine what that would do and how important it becomes. Combined heat and power is using natural gas to create electricity in microprocessors that we want to promote throughout the province that would be then put back to the grid using natural gas, but it actually is less carbon footprint than a big windmill. The thing that often gets missed on the calculations of the windmills is that there's 40 cubic meters of concrete in the ground. Thank you very much.
You knew I was going to say 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Fritz. All right. Next person on the presenter list is Ms. Cheryl Bradley. If you'd like to come up, the floor is yours. And you have no technology either? All right. Perfect. Please come on up.
All right. Madam Chair and other councillors, members of the Government Standing Policy Committee, I'm here today as a director of Southern Alberta Group for Environment, and I want to reinforce our organization's written submission encouraging your support for the City of Lethbridge Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, which I'll call CASIP. SAGE, as some of you may not know, is a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization, and since 1984 has been a leading voice for a healthy and environmentally sustainable community. SAGE has been represented in the workshops to develop the CASIP, which was open to community groups. Climate change, based on lots of scientific evidence, is shaping up to be the biggest environmental challenge our community faces. Extreme drought, extreme heat, prolonged drought, fundamental shift in amount and timing of precipitation will force humans and other living beings, plant and animal, to adapt in order to persist and thrive in southern Alberta. By the 2080s, Lethbridge is predicted to have a similar ecosystem as present-day Kansas. Mitigating to, responding to, and adapting to the risks and impacts of climate change is essential, whether we like it or not. The CASIP provides important and realistic direction for assessing risks and for predicting and addressing impacts on our community's natural and built environments, economy, and for social cohesion. Analysis during the planning process identified the very real cost of inaction. Workshop deliberations built on direction already recommended in the Municipal Development Plan, and we benefited from learnings and experiences of other communities in Alberta, Canada, and abroad. The CASIP is very much tailored to Lethbridge. On behalf of SAGE, I wish to emphasize the importance of leadership by City Council and municipal administration in enabling collaboration and encouraging partnerships, emergency preparedness, supporting health and safety, particularly among the vulnerable in our community, protecting critical infrastructure, resilient design, water stewardship, transitioning to drought and heat-tolerant landscapes, and conserving the services that our natural areas provide. Your support for the CASIP will demonstrate that leadership in preparing Lethbridge for and increasing resiliency to the anticipated impacts climate change is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. So we have gone through the list of people who have requested to speak and whose names I have. We'll open it now to anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak. Same rules apply. Please present your name so Mr. Westerson can capture your name. And please note you have 5 minutes. So is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak? Okay, please come on up. Welcome. And again, if you can just make sure we get your name.
Okay, my name's Shannon Frank, and I'm with the Old Man Watershed Council. We provided a letter of support for the initiative, and I just wanted to add a couple of things that have really struck me today. So one, we have climate data from the past 1,000 years of the history, and we know that we live in the most extreme place other than Siberia in the world. That's something that Dr. Dave Sachin often reiterates, and I have the data showing that. So whether or not you believe in climate change, we have a prerogative to deal with the extreme floods and droughts and heat that we experience. So that's important to remember. Secondly, I'd like to say that I work a lot with our rural neighbors, the farmers, the First Nations, the ranchers who are closer to the land than we are in the city. And what I'm seeing the last few years is quite scary. We have a lot of folks whose dugouts have dried up, their wells have dried up, their springs, their creeks, all dried up. And, hopefully they'll come back if we get some wet years. But we know from the past 1,000 years of climate history that we can have 50-year droughts. We've never experienced that as settlers. Our First Nations neighbors can tell us stories of how they barely survived those years and how they had to move away because there was no water sources. So I think we have to acknowledge that reality and that history and learn from our neighbors who are having to adapt, and they're doing it because they have no choice. And we need to adapt before we run out of choices. And thirdly, I just want to say, I spent the last 3 days at the Kainai Ecosystem Protection Association Summit with our leaders from Ghana. And one thing that they kept reiterating over those 3 days is that they're doing this work of environmental protection, not for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren. And that their goal is to leave something for their children to have a chance at prosperity. And I think we should all strive to show that kind of leadership. Otherwise, what are we leaving for the future? And what kind of future is it going to be if it's hot and dry and we have to move because there's literally no water left? Or there's, not enough economic opportunities because it would impact our agricultural sector very, very significantly. I was on a call this morning with the irrigation districts and the government of Alberta. They're only able to irrigate 8 inches this year instead of the normal 16 to 22. That's a problem. That's going to impact us economically and in many other ways. So this is happening now, and I think a lot of us in the city are insulated from that, and we need to realize that we're running out of time and this is getting serious. And I'm seeing that on the ground in our rural communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this topic this afternoon? Again, 5 minutes, and please give your name for Mr. Westerson.
My name is Kathy Heidebrecht. Did the city consult the community of Lethbridge about joining an international coalition of unelected private and public sector representatives? Did you know that the United Nations Agenda 21 restructured our local governments using public-private partnership agreements? How did the UN do this? They did it by creating a strategic global coalition of partners from the public and private sectors, willing to share their replicable steps to directing local affairs. By joining international forces locally, we strive towards making the UN 2030 Global Agenda a reality. Have you read Agenda 21 and Agenda 30? Are these sustainable development goals in alignment with the city's goals? Should they be? Global to local corporate government is a fraudulent but legal way of taking over lawful local regulatory control of our land and assets. In Canada, we have 3 defined levels of governance: federal, provincial, and municipal. Here in Lethbridge, we constituents elected a mayor to act as local head of government for the area, not a private head of council for a provincial service corporation. As an elected official, you may want to inquire if your legal status has been compromised. Did you sign the declaration of office rather than a public oath of office? If you signed the Alberta Municipal Act Declaration of Office, you agreed to incorporate all things local and thus abandon fiduciary responsibility as elected public trustees and guardians. As you engage in matters that are handed down from the UN, this may lead to incredible personal liability for your willing participation in de facto possession of public trust accounts. Please be advised that you could be held personally liable for every document you sign. If you're taking orders from ICLEI, who claim no responsibility, and there is any reasonable evidence that the models being used for climate change in this extreme weather, if it may not be as accurate as they say, would you please consider not approving the KSAP report? Expect a package in the mail explaining these matters. Respectfully, it is our duty to restore peace, order, and good governance to the city of Lethbridge.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? You only get one chance to speak. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the community audience who would wish to speak this afternoon? Okay, please come forward. You have 5 minutes, and please provide your name to Mr. Westerson.
Hello, my name is Kelty Baird. I am a local resident of Lethbridge for the past 17 years, a local business owner, an advocate, and when Belinda's in the room, I hesitate to call myself a historian, but I do have a degree in history. I'm here before you today as a kind of amicus brief about why and other members of my generation really are so concerned and why we do support the adoption of the proposed climate adaptation strategy and action plan. 170 to 200 years since the start of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, a catalyst of technological, economic, social, and scientific success, but with unexpected and unimagined ecological consequences. That's how long it's been, just 200 years. While other more knowledgeable minds than I can speak to the environmental catastrophe of the last 2 centuries, I can tell you that a lack of recognition of the environment as a key character in the policies of the past is a major factor in the impending crisis of our modern day. People of my generation do feel that climate change is an existential crisis, and we appreciate that while our local climate may be relatively protected from the worst effects of global climate change, we also recognize that there will be a need to allow our city to grow as more people displaced by the extreme weather events of climate change seek new, more stable places to live. Over 80% of the global population is anticipated to be affected by the very extreme weather as they live in the equatorial regions of the globe. By including the environmental lens in our policy creation at a city level, we can affect the greatest change, but also the most socially and fiscally responsible change to help us avoid the dystopian future so feared by some of our citizens that we have heard from today. I deeply urge this committee to recommend the adoption of this plan. By adopting this plan, the city signals to future generations whom we are responsible to in our stewardship of the planet that we care and that we will be prepared. Thank you very much for your time, and please, I ask this committee to pass along to council with the recommendation to adopt this plan so that these great works can begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baird. Sir? No, unfortunately not. That's not in our procedure bylaw. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the subject? All right. We move then to questions of committee. Committee can ask questions of any of the presenters or of administration. So do I have any questions from either of my colleagues on the committee? All right, we'll start with actually Mayor Higgin. He got in the queue. Oh, sorry, that's me. Never mind, Mayor Higgin. I'm seeing your name, but that's me. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And this question is for Ms. Parker and her team. Okay. So there's a comment in the report that states that certain strategies may have unintended consequences on the local ecosystem or biodiversity. I'm just wondering if you can maybe help me understand that a bit better. What unintended consequences, do we have a forecast on what that might be? It just seemed like a very general statement, so I'm curious as to what we're talking about when we say that.
The key point with some of that would be the actions that have been identified. A lot of them are at a higher level statement where there would be additional analysis needed to build out that action. So to that point, a lot of this would be making sure that maladaptations or things like that would not be part of the details when you go to build out that action. But the actions that were selected, there was a high level cost benefit analysis done that considered those things like co-benefits or maladaptation that helped to prioritize what went in the plan.
Okay.
So there is not anticipated for those impacts to be there.
Okay, perfect. And then there's a statement about strategies that are going to be coordinated across partner organizations. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like? What partner organizations are we talking about? What strategies? What does that mean? What does that look like?
So what that can do is actually start to continue to build on the engagement that was done as part of the plan. So involving community organizations or other key industries that are part of those initiatives. One of the actions in the first theme was potentially considering a flagship program, for example, where you look at a project, but involve those different organizations to help come up with specifics on that action. You are seeing in other organizations such as City of Calgary where they've established a climate committee where they bring in an external group of people to help have that oversight as well to the implementation.
Okay.
So that can look different.
Okay, but we are looking at then, as we move through these, including all of our partner organizations throughout the city, City of Lethbridge, small c, City of Lethbridge, to partake in building these out.
Correct. Maybe not on every action, but that first theme is really about understanding the structure. So part of that would be also integrating within the city and coordinating across departments, but there would be that external piece as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. I'd like to provide the opportunity for, with your indulgence, Chair, Ms. Parker, if you or any of the members of your group would like to address any of the comments by any of the presenters in terms of their efficacy or their authenticity, do you have any concerns with any of the comments that you'd like to address today?
Yes, I'll just highlight a couple things to reiterate that this plan is very much a Lethbridge-specific plan. It was highly involved with local people. It also closely followed an approach by PIBC, which is Engineers Canada and the Climate Risk Institute. So in terms of the processes of how to develop this, it may have followed a process, but is very much informed by local knowledge, context, and input. And I think that would be the key thing I'd want to get across there.
Thank you. Ms. Parker, is there beyond accepting this report for information and moving it forward to council, is there anything that we need to be doing, we should be doing, or that you'd like to see us doing from a council perspective and or providing direction to administration?
I think the main thing would be to have this as a lens as we move forward so that it's at least part of the conversation and decision making, kind of the triple bottom line. You've got the economic, the social, and the environmental piece. So really looking forward to having that environmental component contemplated.
Thank you. One last question in regards to the Oldman River that runs through the city or divides the city actually. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that we must work with Fisheries and Oceans Canada on any of the mitigation strategies in terms of the potential for flooding or any other strategies that we might utilize. I wonder if you could comment on that. Are we working with, I'm confident we're working with the county, I'm confident we're working with the province and other partners, but are we working with Fisheries and Oceans Canada on issues around flooding and mitigation in the River Valley?
So any projects that come up with respect to actually touching the river, the banks and the river itself, yes, Fisheries and Oceans would have to be part of those conversations to make sure that we are in line and in keeping with the legislation that's in place.
Okay, and if, for example, we had flooding, which we have had in the past, and we have had certainly several times over the last 1,000 years. I've lived in Paradise Canyon for 22 years, and we've had 3 floods. So if we were going to do anything to mitigate flooding, to manage flooding more effectively, we would have to work with Fisheries and Oceans, even though that's primarily private land. Is that correct?
If there's potential impact to the river itself, the banks and bed of the river, then yes, we would have to deal with Fisheries and Oceans Canada.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for answering my questions.
Mr. Sanchez, I want to start with you because you oversee this department, but you also have, planning and development, water and wastewater. So many of the things that was presented today ties in with other departments under your purview. When you're looking at things like this, certainly some of the things Mr. Fritz said, do you consider this overall in your department? Are all of these sort of plans that you have linked and connected?
Yes, thanks for the question. I will say that this is only one of the elements that we consider. As it was stated at the beginning of the presentation, the NDP is one of those guiding plans and principles that we use in order to do most of the work. Climate adaptation plan is one of those. We also have the PCP energy conservation plan and the different master plans that we have in the department. So definitely in the planning and design, we have a project going on, which is the land use bylaw renewal project. There are a few elements here that will be also considered when we come back to council with those recommendations. We heard a little bit about densification and the benefits of that, definitely. There is a good opportunity to have all these different plans as a framework that we can use in order to inform future decisions. And also it's important to mention that once we get this framework in place, we will come back during the CIP process with those projects, and that's the time that council will have an opportunity to see the benefits, the cost-benefit analysis in order to make a decision.
And you know, I like to make everything kind of cohesive. When I look at this plan and look at the other work you're doing, essentially the purpose of this plan is to protect our infrastructure, protect our residents, protect our society, protect our environment. That's the bare minimum of what this plan intends to do, is it not?
That is correct. And there is also another element too that I know Mr. Matthews' team is working on the asset management side, because there is a component that will fit into that program as well. And that means when we do the life cycle, when we do the renewal projects, this lens will also be used into the asset management side and the capital program. So absolutely infrastructure. We need to start thinking about what can we do different and how we can benefit. The other element too that we need to consider is the funding that is available right now. And there are opportunities that this will set the framework for us to look at that funding and see if we can come back and bring those to council.
And the most basic purpose of a council is to protect those things, our residents, our infrastructure, our community.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanchez. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Okay. I will read then the motion. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, the motion has so far been assigned to you. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommends that Council, 1, adopt the Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan as an Attachment 1 in principle as a guiding document to provide direction for the continued development of climate adaptation planning. And 2, direct administration to return to City Council through the Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee for approval of any of the objectives identified in the Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan that require change in budget or service level as follows. A, capital projects to be submitted to future capital improvement program, CIP, deliberations, and B, operating initiatives to be submitted to future operating budget deliberations. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Parker, for you and your team bringing this forward. It's a very fulsome report, and I certainly appreciate that. This plan is in alignment with the City of Lethbridge Municipal Development Plan. The Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan provides strategic direction, including principles to guide decision-making on climate action within our organization. The plan works to reduce negative effects on people, society, infrastructure, and the environment. Yesterday, the three of us of this committee, we were at Alberta Municipality Summer Caucus, and we heard a statement from one of the leaders of one of our neighboring communities, and he stated that that community is ruthlessly focused on infrastructure and core needs. And I see that as a need in this city as well, and that's what this focuses on. This plan focuses on those core needs that we need to be looking at: city emergency preparedness, health, safety, and prepared communities, protecting our critical infrastructure, resilient design, water stewardship, transitioning landscapes, and protecting and embracing nature. Those are the core needs in this community, and that's what this plan focuses on. And with that, I will ask for my colleagues' support moving this forward to our council.
Okay. I just want to add my thanks again. I know this is a long time creating a plan like this, so thank you for all the work. I don't see any other person in the debate. Question's been called. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we switch from summer to winter, where we go on to snow and ice. Okay. We will take a quick break because we are momentarily losing quorum. So we will just pause for 2 minutes or so. Snow and ice. Ms. Ruck. Transportation Snow and Ice Control Service Level Change Implementation Phase 2 Information Update. I think the title alone may be longer than your presentation. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. No worries. Thanks for having us here today to provide this update. Our goal is to discuss additional program options for the 2024-25 season that consider the potential cost savings that we identified and also the negative sentiments that we have determined by the public during the last season when they received this new service level. So I'll browse to the next slide for the sake of time. No, that's okay. So this slide kind of highlights all the milestones that we experienced during this project. We've done a lot of public engagement, as you're aware, and the report outlines the details for all these milestones. And I'll move right to the next slide. So last year, or last season, there were 6,000 households impacted from this new service level. At the beginning of the season, we distributed postcards and letters to all 6,000 households, informing them about the change and how they can stay informed and give feedback throughout the 5 times last season, and 3 of those events were quite significant. The January event, the February event, and especially the March 21st event, where we received 41 centimeters in the city. So for those 3 significant events, we not only plowed along these snow roads, we also did snow removal in the downtown core for the first 2 significant events. And then in March, we even had to do snow removal around the school zones. That's where we grade everything and pick it up. Next slide, please. So our key findings from last season were, when it comes to financial impacts, we confirmed that plowing along those snow roads is 25 times less expensive than snow removal would be. So this is real direct cost data that we used. Just the cost savings alone mean that we could stabilize our operating costs and we would be less weather dependent. And we also plowed these 81 kilometers way more frequently than we would have done in the past with the old service level. When it comes to community impacts, there were 3 that were all kind of focused around the windrow issue. People experienced the windrows along the curbs as a barrier, just getting out of their cars, climbing over them, and accessing the sidewalk and the houses. Then they were challenging to remove, like the shoveling in itself, and they also blocked driveways. The other theme that we saw that people were really mentioning is that parking lanes were not cleared very well because cars were parked there. Like, people ignored our parking bans. And so when cars were parked there, then our plows couldn't get into those parking lanes and spots, and that created rutting and ice and issues down the road. Next slide here. So throughout the season, we heard feedback, we monitored feedback, we had different venues, one-on-one conversations, public events, 311 reports, and tried to do some operational adjustments to mitigate effects, and also had targeted communication efforts to mitigate all these things that residents experienced. One of them I really want to highlight is our Mighty Neighbor initiative, where we had over than 70 nominations, where people acknowledged a really good neighbor in the neighborhood. Most of them, it was winter, focused around shoveling snow, but we have some really cute and heartwarming stories that we learned. Next slide, please. So we went back to the drawing board and looked at what other communities are doing. And there's a variety of approaches when it comes to windrows. Some communities make it the homeowner's full responsibility to deal with windrow issues. Other communities allow a subscription-based program, or some communities clear all the driveways during significant events. So we developed these 2 options for your consideration. And what I'd like to highlight about option 1 is, this is kind of, I would almost call it we put an equitable lens on it to create equity for different, based on people's different needs, right? So we would allow residents to call in prior to the season start and subscribe to a windrow assistance program. And the other option 2 is where we just we know there's around 3,200 driveways along those roads. We would open them up after the event, and that would be kind of that program. What I'd like to point out is that we need to keep the parking ban longer in place just to allow equipment to get to those locations. That might create some dissatisfaction with our program. Also, it will be hard to manage expectations for residents. They want things likely done faster. And then the snow will still be piled on site. Like, to truck it away just becomes very cost prohibitive. So we have to find space on site for the snow. So in summary, we are here today to look for direction and discussion on this preferred level of service for the upcoming season, and how we will balance residents' negative sentiment from last season and their want that we should rate their safety and convenience more than the cost savings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think most everyone in the audience is speak on this matter to the committee. No? Nobody just has a snow issue they really want to discuss? All right, then we will move to questions. I have Councillor Middleton Hope first in the queue.
I hope you're not suggesting they've been snowed.
Touché.
All right. Yes, I have a couple of questions. Ms. Ruck, thank you for the presentation. As always, it's interesting. I now know what a windrow opening is, and thank you for putting together a strategy on how we might manage it. Can you explain for me, which I wasn't able to find the definition of what a subscription opening is?
Yeah, so we would allow residents to call prior to the season, like we're thinking.
Okay.
by end of September, because they'd have to call, say, I'm interested in this program, I need help to deal with my windrow, either along my driveway, we'd open up your driveway, or we are also thinking to include people that just have curb parking but need to maneuver wheelchairs or have mobility issues.
Sure.
And would open a spot for them, probably just a car length wide, just to keep things manageable. And then you would be on a list, and as soon as we plow, some contractor would come afterwards within 48 to 72 hours once the snowfall stops and clear that spot.
Thank you.
Just a second before you go on, I think Mr. Sanchez wants to add to that answer.
Oh, how could he possibly?
Yes, I would like to take the opportunity to do an analogy on how this program could work.
Sure.
You might be or not familiar with the program that we have on the Waste and Environment Department for residents on the waste pickup. This is those customers that they need assistance with their collection of the cart. So that program is on the same fashion. It's subscription-based. They call the department. The department, there is a little bit of difference on that one is implemented to what we're planning to do here. But basically, the department goes there, work with the residents, and find a location where they can leave the cart outside of the garage or the house. And then our driver get off the truck and put it there. And the benefit of doing this type of programs is that we only do this for people that really need the service, not for everybody, because other people might have family or friends that can do that work for us. So it's a way to be cost effective and keep in mind that the service is there for those that need it.
Right. So the difference between the bins is this is a free service that we provide, and it's predicated on need. This is not a free service. This is a service that we're going to charge.
It's a free service too.
Oh, it's still a free service. So you're going to bring a Bobcat in and clear my driveway because somebody with a plow has dumped a windrow in front of my driveway.
That's so we believe, because we create these cost savings with the plowing to the right, that there would be some room in the budget to accommodate those needs. And again, it created an equitable service for the people in need.
Okay, so the costing up there was what it costs us to do it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I have lots of more questions, but Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, if you want to jump in, please do. No, you're okay? Okay.
Well, thank you for taking over for chair, but you can continue, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you have questions, by all means.
Go right ahead.
Great.
I think you're asking some of the questions that we had on our list anyways.
Okay. Just a couple of other ones, then I'll get to them. One of the complaints that we receive from, and as you're aware, we do Coffee with Council on a regular basis with a number of different groups. Some of them are seniors groups. One of the complaints that we have heard on a number of occasions, and I wonder if you could address it, is that it's not snow on curbs, it's not snow in the roads, it's not plowing and windrows and so forth. It's snow that is not cleared off by residents on sidewalks that are adjacent to alleyways. So it's the alleyway portion that is the component, the piece that seniors that have mobility issues are concerned about. Have we addressed that, or are we contemplating addressing that in the future? Perhaps even just around some of the seniors' facilities that when they get out and they walk around, it's great. The neighbors have cleared up to the side, to the alleyway. Then you get 30 feet of snow and ice, and then the road is cleaned again.
Correct. Councillor Middleton Hope, I'll try to answer the first question you had and paint a picture. We already have a contractor doing snow removal at bus stops. It's Tollstrip does our contract. Very similar to that. The plows are plowing a windrow along there. 4 hours, 10 hours, 24 hours later, Tollstrip is removing. It's 200 to 300 bus stops. So that's the picture of what Julianne was painting there for residential openings by subscription, and it's voluntary. They will just have to register. We won't be saying no to anybody per se. I happen to live on a snow route. I won't be applying, but I know I have a very senior neighbor that will probably be applying. So that's the scenario there. The answer to your second question is around sidewalks. There's a sidewalk snow removal bylaw. The residents in front of their properties are required to. The orphaned pieces of sidewalk, lanes, park areas, they're called Parks Priority 4. So you can see it on the parks snow removal maps, and there are little dots everywhere. And it rarely gets done because by the time Parks gets to priority 4, there might be a Chinook to melt it. But it is part of this park snow removal process in the park snow removal, those orphaned sidewalks that don't get done by a resident.
So in response to, if I'm well, I am a senior, but if I'm living in a facility and I'm challenged by mobility, I want to hear something to the extent that we're either looking at a strategy, we're trying to mitigate it, we're trying to do something to clear that 30 feet in between the responsible citizens and the laneway.
May I suggest, though, if it is parks, Ms. Kleisinger may want to weigh in on this because, right, that is a parks department and it's not this department's area.
Do you do snow as well?
On parks, she does.
Well, so okay, it could be parks, but I'm thinking specifically of alleyways around seniors' facilities and so forth. So is there any strategy that we're working on thinking about that might address that?
Yeah, I think what we would have to do is talk with our Parks Department. Every fall, we sit down with the Parks Department. The Snow and Ice Control Program is broken up into 2 pieces. $3.88 million goes to transportation, and about just under $1 million, I believe, goes to the Parks Department, and they do their service levels for parks on pathways. Anything within the park system is removed by Parks. And those orphan pieces of sidewalk are also part of the sidewalk program by Parks. Other places like that.
If I may add a little bit here, just to 2 things. One is I know one of the programs that is being presented here is an outreach and education program called Mighty Neighbors. So that's one option that for sure we need to promote more because there might be an opportunity for additional help from neighbors that can do that work. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, again, like with everything else, it all goes back to level of service and the budget that we have allocated to that level of service. If we want to increase the service that we currently do, we will need to go back and probably one of the recommendations here is that we want to test this out 1 more year, come back next year and report back. Most likely at that time, there might be other ideas that we can propose in order to, if there are additional savings that we are achieving and that funding is there, then again, that could be a proposal that could be put forward for council consideration during the next operating and capital budget.
Okay, I'm just simply making you alive to the complaints that we've received. I want you to hear them. And I want to, at some point, be able to go back to some of these residences and say, well, this is what we're doing or we're not doing. That's all. Okay? Still got a couple of more comments. I'll save them for the end. Go ahead.
Okay. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much. So just to follow up on Councillor Middleton Hope's comments about complaints, while all this was going on during the winter, I had a couple of really interesting complaints requesting that we not plow their streets. That the streets that these 2 residents lived on hadn't been plowed in some 30 years. They don't live on a bus route. They were taking care of each other and could clear the driveways. And why are we wasting our dollars on them? So, I mean, I guess I'm wondering in response to those, and it was just 2 calls, but I'm wondering in response to those 2 calls, how did we decide where to plow? Because I'm wondering, are there other areas that were new to the plowing this year? And how did we decide to plow those areas if we don't need to be doing them?
Minor modifications, but most of these 81 kilometers are former priority 2 and 3 snow removal routes. And we totally recognize that these residents have not gotten much service in the past because we only did snow removal because it's so costly during very extreme events, like when we had probably more than 20, 30 centimeters on the ground and the roads were really plugged up with snow. The big events that come to mind were 2017, 18, right? 19, those were the really heavy snow events. I have a graph in the report. You can see we had more than normal snow, and we did do snow removal in those areas at that time.
So just so I'm clear, those were on bigger events then? They wouldn't regularly be plowed going forward, or they just get plowed on really large events?
Historically.
Okay.
And now these 81 kilometers, we plow there, like last year we plowed 5 times. Okay. So historically, they probably on average only got every 5 years the service when there was a real bad snow event. And now we were able to plow there 5 times a year.
So if we're looking for some cost savings on this, then could we not go back to look at some of those routes where residents maybe don't feel it's necessary to plow, and we can allocate that funds towards that windrow removal in front of driveways?
I'll try to explain the 25 times cheaper, because in March, we would have had to do snow removal on all of these routes. There was 40 centimeters of snow fell. So we would have had to do windrow to the middle, old-fashioned snow removal, which was 25 times more. And I think in the presentation we had one event would save $500,000. So if we would have done snow removal versus the plowing last year, we would have had to remove snow for an additional 81 kilometers, this plow to the right area, and that would have cost us $500,000 extra. But even saying that, Julianne said we plowed 5 times, so the residences actually had a better service level because it was plowed. The inconvenience was there was a small or a large windrow on their outside driveway. So that's the cause and effect. But it definitely saved us money operationally last year with one major event. In 2009, 2011, 2018, when we had major events, that would have been 5 to 10 events. Then we would have saved serious operational dollars because we would have been plowing to the right. The suggestion we have here is just creating openings would alleviate the concerns brought up by the public, because it all seemed to be around getting over that windrow during major events. 3 major events, January, February, and March, but then it snowed. I think there was 7 or 9 snowfalls, but we didn't have to plow to the right for all of those. Does that?
Well, so even adding the extra routes still saves us operational dollars, because this is these are individuals who say, don't plow my street, save your money. But we're still saving money even plowing their street.
25 times cheaper when you do have to do snow removal versus plowing. So that's the calculation we did to make sure the evidence is there. How much money would we save? And in this event, we picked March as the big event, 40 centimeters. The other ones were around 15 to 20 centimeters. People still complained when we plowed the 15 to 20 centimeters to the right, but the windrow was a lot less. I live on a snow route, so I know the difference about a big windrow and a smaller windrow, and I'm more concerned about the windrow when it freezes overnight at 40 below, and then it's a pile of ice.
Right.
Just to add, my microphone.
Yep.
Oh, now you shut it off.
Sorry. Just to add, the community sentiment was negative, especially by the impacted people, but we also got lots of positive comments about the roads are clear, there is no ice on, because the mechanical removal of the snow, with our weather here, it evaporates quickly, the roads are dry, bare asphalt, we don't have to put sand and salt down, so there is a lot of benefits that people overlook when they are right then impacted shoveling that windrow in front of their driveway.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So one other question I have, how does this plan address the plowing issues that we saw in the downtown core this year? So certainly we had a lot of complaints over the 2 large piles of snow that caused accessibility issues between the parking and the bike lanes. So you had a large pile of snow right along one of the edges of the bike lanes, and then as you plowed the bike lanes, there's another large pile of snow on the sidewalks, and people are navigating 2 large piles of snow. So how is this going to address that issue?
I think you talk about I don't want to mention the vendor in public, but a bank downtown where there was large piles, and they were not created by us. So we were struggling with how we educate the businesses with snow removal when it comes to these large amounts. When we cleared the bike path, we pushed the snow over the curb, and then we came with graders right after and removed it on trucks and trucked it away.
Okay.
With that as well, because the plow to the right is only in residential areas. So the downtown, nothing has changed in the downtown for this trial. The only thing that's changed in the downtown is now those separated bike lanes required a new piece of equipment, and we rented or purchased, I'm not sure which, that new piece of equipment, and that'll clear the snow a lot easier, faster, and move it onto the street, and then we remove the snow the old-fashioned way, bale it to the middle and load it to the snow dump site. Extremely expensive. So the only priority one snow removal that hasn't changed is downtown and the hospital. That's all been the same status quo on that.
Okay, and we'll do some education around that again this winter? Perfect. Thank you very much.
So let's cut to the chase for what I need to know. We are in the middle of a pilot. You had complaints from the public. You have made adjustments to the pilot program, creating the subscription. You're going to go out and let people know about it, have them enroll in it. You're going to pilot it over the winter. We review in the spring, take all the information from the past few years, and council makes a decision.
That's why we're here today, yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's all I needed to just have confirmed that this is still piloting and we're just listening to the public and improving it. All right. Councillor Middleton Hope?
Perhaps we'll have Mr. Westerson provide more outreach training on how to use the microphones. These questions are for Mr. Matthews. Mr. Matthews, I wonder if I could draw your attention to Appendix A, which talks in terms of surplus versus deficit. The first question I'm going to ask is, it appears over I guess it's about a 15-year period, roughly, we've generated about a $5.3 million deficit in transportation and parks. Do I read that correctly?
That is correct.
However, the good news is that we have generated a surplus to budget of $1.278 million last year. Is that correct?
That is also correct.
All right. What I don't understand is it as a result of the great work that our transportation department is doing, or is that also combined with the great work that our parks department is doing? It would be nice to see a separation between the two.
Yeah, I don't know if, I don't have it at my fingertips here. I'm not sure if Ms. Ruck has that or Mr. Jewell has that in front of him, but we can definitely provide that in future reports.
Yeah.
We actually usually have this information, as Mr. Jewell will know. We talk about this a lot in regards to when we bring our unaudited reports through and forecasting reports through as well. So we can do that in the future. It is both pieces. I'm just looking at them to confirm that it is inside of there, and I believe most of it is the good work in transportation. Nothing against the great work that is being done in parks.
Well, I'm just wondering who gets the gold medal, whether it's Mr. Jewell or it's Mr. Richter, one of the two.
We'd have to look at the percentage of surplus between the two, but yes, we can look at that too.
All right.
I can try to help you out with that because transportation takes most of the blame over the last 15 years because parks was more stable and they don't deal with the big snow dumps, the big snow dumps. So when we do emergency snow removal and that comes out of MRSR, that's what really takes the big chunk of the overages. So I remember 2009, 2011, 2018, 19. Those are the years that I lost a lot of sleep and a lot of hair over because that's where the deficit was created, primarily from transportation, but not 100% of it. Some of it was small amount from parks. But that's what we're trying to do is stabilize those overages with this plowing to the right concept. And then if there is a major bad winter, we just won't go over as bad as we had in the past.
Okay. I'd be claiming the success for this as well.
Yeah.
So Mr. Richter isn't here. But I think separating the two in the future might help for us to get a really clear understanding for the strategies that we're utilizing in transportation. They're having an impact. Here's what the impact is. So thank you very much for that. One last comment that I have for also for Mr. Matthews and perhaps the city manager. I'm quite familiar with benchmarking, and I note with a little bit of dismay that I've seen a number of different reports. We utilize a variety of different cities for benchmarking. I'd like to see some consistency in that. It's difficult, I think, for us to compare ourselves to Toronto or Montreal or Edmonton or Calgary. Perhaps a more robust examination would be some of the cities that are 100 to 200,000 in Western Canada, particularly, not that there are many, and perhaps some in Ontario, to give us maybe a more fulsome examination of how we compare to some of these other communities. Because I can't see how we compare to Toronto in any way, shape, or form. I wonder if you wouldn't mind, if you care to comment on that.
Happy to comment. Quite honestly, we talked about it as recently as this morning.
Oh, there you go.
So it's always a challenge to compare apples to apples, and there's a number of municipal benchmarking network that's ebbed and flowed over time, and others that I've been involved in for many years that endeavor to do that, but it's a challenge. So yeah, we hear you, and that's part of what we're talking about, not just in this area, but across all of our departments and having those relevant comparators.
Good. Perhaps in Mr. Jewell's spare time, he can develop those relationships across the country.
I can say we already have, because transportation has been for 3 years now, I believe, part of, it was Alberta benchmarking, now it's national benchmarking, and we're usually using populations of 50 to 250,000 cities to compare to, all the way from BC to East Coast. And so there's a number of cities. I know Lethbridge is higher in snow removal, cost per capita, but that's because we have such a high service level. But we also have Chinooks that help us out. So we're not the extreme either, not like Banff.
Excellent, thank you. And we have parks to help you out as well.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Perfect. So that ends questions. You guys can have a seat if you'd like. We're going to move to the motion. This motion is from Councillor Middleton Hope. Be resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council, 1, direct administration to implement option 1, plowing to the right, with windrow subscription openings on a trial basis for the 2024-25 winter season, and 2, direct administration to report back to City Council in the spring of 2025 with the results of the 3-year trial of snow and ice control service level changes. Councillor Middleton Hope.
There we go. Thank you. And I see some of our communications people in the audience. I can see that this could become a communications nightmare, but it's clearly going to be critical in terms of conveying what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what the potential impact is going to have on the public. Other than that, I think the proposals as submitted are robust, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 things that we've questioned in regards to benchmarking. But other than that, I think it's generating surpluses, which is important, and it seems to be having a sustainable and positive impact on the community. Could we also, as a part of this, I'm just wondering if we could keep track of the level of complaints versus compliments on this. This might be helpful. And I think at the end of the day, if there are questions or comments from my colleagues, any other submissions? No? Okay, then we'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Passes unanimously as well. Thank you very much. And hopefully we won't be talking about snow again till November.
Or later.
All right, moving now to item 5.4, Mr. Hillier, General Manager, Customer Service and Corporate Performance on CC 72, Customer Code of Conduct Policy. Welcome, Mr. Hillier, and tell us all about this Customer Code of Conduct Policy.
Thank you for having me here today to talk to you about our proposed new customer code of conduct policy. Next slide. So the following information was contained within guidelines shared with us by the Alberta Ombudsman and helped us in crafting the policy before you today. I will highlight a couple of the bullets here and recognize that you've had this in advance and had an opportunity to read through not only the presentation but the policy itself. So the first thing I'd like to highlight is the first bullet that the Alberta Ombudsman recommends that all organizations should consider developing specific policies and procedures to effectively manage unreasonable conduct. And the fourth bullet as well, which is that by having this in place, it ensures that cases are effectively managed and is the key to maintaining efficient operations, ensuring safety and well-being of staff, and ensuring an equitable and fair allocation of resources for all service users. Next slide, please. The definitions on this page are contained within the policy and again are based on the information shared with us by the Alberta Ombudsman. They did have 4 areas that they recommended highlighting. The first being reasonable demands, which are customer interactions that are attainable, realistic, and proportionate to the resources available to the City of Lethbridge. An example of an unreasonable behavior in that would be a customer or citizen issuing instructions and making demands about how to handle their interactions, the priority it should be given, or actually stating the outcome that should be achieved with their interaction. The second here being reasonable cooperation, which is customer interactions that are presented in a reasonably organized manner with a clear, relevant definition of concerns and appropriate level of detail. An example of unreasonably use of that would be sending a customer that's sending a consistent stream of complex or disorganized information without clearly defining the issue or explaining how the material provided actually relates to their problem. The next one is reasonable persistence, and this is when customers are expected to accept a reasonable and logical explanation from city representatives. An example of unreasonable use of this would be multiple repeated phone calls, visits, letters, emails, or forum shopping, which would be sending the same information to multiple people across the organization with hopes of getting a different response. The next would be unreasonable behaviors, which is just being courteous and respectful. And again, unreasonable in this would be acts of aggression, verbal abuse, derogatory comments, racist, defamatory remarks. And finally, reasonable arguments, which is that customer interactions that have a cause and effect, and where possible, you're able to resolve the interaction. And this would basically be arguments that are trivial when compared to the amount of time, resources, and attention that the customer demands. Next slide, please. So again, this policy is written in the positive in that we are hopeful that our interactions will always be reasonable, but it does outline what would happen if a customer did breach the policy. And the first is that restrictions can, it doesn't say will, but could be placed on a customer if they are in breach of the policy, and that those restrictions would be appropriate and proportionate to the nature of the breach. So again, depending on the level, the restrictions would be appropriate to that. And some examples of that could be things like limiting contact channels, meaning they would only deal with a certain city representative, or limiting subject matters, meaning that if maybe they, to the prior presentation, maybe they, because they were continuing to talk about snow and ice removal and unwilling to listen, that you might restrict the comments on that. With all that being said, this is my last slide, and it is our recommendation that the Governance SPC recommend that Council adopt the new CC 72 Customer Code of Conduct Policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hillier. I am going to again make the assumption that there's no one in the audience who wishes to speak on this. But I do open it up to any members of the public. We won't limit your time, don't worry. No. All right, thank you, Mr. Hillier. We will now move to questions. Start with Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hillier, for providing this presentation. I know you and I have had conversations going back many, many months about this, and I really appreciate on a personal note, I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I have a few questions, and I'm wondering if you can perhaps take a stab at them. One of them is in regards to a definition, is reasonable cooperation the same as reasonable conduct? There are two terms that are used there, and I'm just wondering if they need to be aligned or whether that could be, whether I'm mistaken in terms of I'm reading more into this than there really is there. I'm. Well, the question's just kind of tossed out there in the air. Let's not waste any time on this. Perhaps that's something for reflection on examining the presentation, and if there is a discrepancy or if there is an alignment, please provide that to members of this committee in the future. In the event that there is a threat to cause bodily harm with or without a weapon, what do employees do?
So we do have specific health and safety policies. So again, something like that where there is a threat to personal safety would not necessarily be covered within this specific policy, but would be covered within other policies within the city. It does reference that in there, that is unacceptable behavior. But again, in those instances, depending on the nature of the interaction, again, personal safety of the employee is of utmost importance.
Okay, so please assure me and this body that we are putting our employees through training that is robust, that will enable them to understand the situation that they're in and how to react appropriately?
So I can speak to the customer service folks in my particular area and can assure you that they do go through robust training about de-escalation as well as other personal safety. And I know in talking with some of the other various directors across the city, I know that does happen in other areas as well.
Okay, thank you. I find that this policy is quite slanted in favor of supporting our employees, and I don't dispute that. And I know that we have a more robust process. If I am a client coming to the front counter, as an example, and I have a complaint about our staff, there is a process that we can be informed about how to move through that. We're clear on that, correct?
So if you're speaking specifically if there's an employee complaint?
Yeah, you're providing me with a service. I don't like the level of service. There is a process that clients can go through, citizens can go through, and they're advised of that process, whether it's a card that they're handed. Okay, good. Last question then. Who determines what a breach of the code of conduct policy is? Is it the employee that determines that? Is it a supervisor? How does that work?
So as outlined in the procedure, the administrative procedure, if an employee feels that there is a breach of the policy, that would be escalated to the inquiry resolution administrator at the city that would compile all the information on the interaction and determine that. Okay,
so there's an employee that's at the front counter, the 311 group, for example. Somebody's acting ignorant towards them. What do? Do they just back off? Do they say, I'm not going to serve you anymore and close the wicket?
In an instance like that, again, with the training that they're provided, that individual would typically be referred to the supervisor at the front counter there to hopefully de-escalate the situation.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Schmidt, Rempel?
Thank you very much, Chair. We've got reasonable, unreasonable. Are we going to help individuals be reasonable if they don't understand that they're being unreasonable? Does that make sense? Because we will have some individuals who think they're being reasonable, but they're not. Will we be able to help them understand?
I think yes. I mean, and we do that today, that, again, we try to educate people through the interactions on helping them to be successful, if that makes sense. Methods and means to the information that we need for us to do whatever that investigation would look like. So, yes.
Okay. And then just in follow-up to that, how and could restrictions be removed? So if we've worked with someone and they seem like they're moving along a more reasonable path, how would the restrictions of communication be removed from them?
Yeah, so in the procedure, we say that the restrictions are reviewed annually by the Inquiry Resolution Administrator. And again, if the behavior is not being exhibited anymore, those restrictions would be removed.
Okay. And then just one final comment, and this ties back to what Councillor Middleton Hope said with regards to definitions. I'm just wondering if we should not perhaps include definitions of reasonable and unreasonable. We do have the examples in there, but I think that allows for some flexibility for people saying, well, I didn't do this. But I think maybe it might help us with providing the community some definitions. And that's just a general observation or comment, something to think about as this moves forward. Thank you very much.
One of the things about this, going through it, this never prohibits anyone from contacting the city. It may limit, but it never prohibits, correct?
That is correct.
So, I mean, again, you always have access to council, you always have access to the staff. This is just making sure that staff time is used effectively and that we're using it to the best way we can to support as many residents as possible.
Yeah, that would be correct. And again, as I had highlighted on I think the last slide, the restrictions would be proportionate and typically related to the interaction. So as an example, using the snow and ice, you may be restricted to talk with us about snow and ice, but that would not in any way restrict you from calling in with concerns about your utility bill or to report a pothole, to attend an SPC and speak at an SPC. It would always be proportionate and related to the breach.
And to reiterate what you said, the Ombudsman Office says this is best practice and actually encourages municipalities to have these.
That is correct. The session that we were in, they recommended, and again, it was amongst municipal colleagues, recommended that every municipality have policies and procedures in place.
And of course, we're focusing on this policy right now, but this is not the only policy we have. There are also administrative policies, et cetera, about offering good customer service, doing your job well, et cetera. We're not putting the onus entirely on the public. We expect our staff to, do your job well. This, though, is one more tool.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. Two questions arise. One is cost and passing on the cost back to clients that repetitively make requests of the corporation. Where are we with that? And I would ask perhaps Mr. Faust to weigh in on court relief in regards to those clients that will not take no for an answer, continue to harass our staff. There is court relief that is available, and I wonder if he could speak to it as well.
He did just say he wonders if you could. He didn't say you had to.
Well,
I just didn't know if we were going to talk about costs first. So there is court relief, there are injunctions, there are prohibitions, and there's trespassing. There's multiple avenues to go. And I think what this is attempting to balance ultimately is that we view citizens' ability to interact with us as being of utmost importance and paramount for the city to be able to run efficiently and transparently. And that's why much of the language in here is based upon trying to deal with a proportional response. And it is pretty vague, and I think we'll know unreasonable when we see it. And then there's a sea of gray in the middle that we all live in. And that's what it's really trying to capture, that middle ground of how can we still let interactions occur. So there are court powers. I think there would be a reluctance to use them, but in the most egregious of situations.
And cost. Where are we with that? Patient man, Mr. Hillier.
Got to wait for the red light.
Yep.
I've been trained. When we were creating the policy, we did look at what other municipalities did have in place and did find that there was typically not a cost associated with that. So at this point, we were not proposing that here, although again, it is something that could be looked at in the future.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of written complaints, and we get flooded with particular ones, not unlike occurs with FOIP requests and so forth. So we've moved down that pathway on FOIP, for example, to provide some form of consequence, financial consequence for repetitive requests. I'm just wondering if that's an avenue that we might consider with regards to ongoing complaints to the corporation, which sometimes tie up a substantial amount of time and money.
Yeah, I mean, again, not being proposed here today, but definitely something we could explore moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
I see my slate of questions is empty. Thank you very much for all of the information. And I do have a motion from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommend that Council adopt CC 72 Customer Code of Conduct Policy as provided in Attachment 1. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, this is moving this forward to City Council to take a look at and adopt. The proposed new CC 72 Customer Code of Conduct Policy recognizes the importance of maintaining a positive and productive environment for all interactions with our customers. It establishes clear expectations and promotes positive behaviors to enhance the effectiveness of city operations and ensure the well-being of all parties involved. And the policy also aims to foster mutually respectful and constructive interactions that's aligned with the Alberta Ombudsman guidelines. If there's no other comments or questions from my colleagues, I would call for the vote on this.
I don't see anyone wishing to debate. Question's been called. All in favor? All right, thank you very much. That will move forward now on to Council. We now finish with presentations, moving on to submissions. 6.1, Echo Nowak, Indigenous Relations Specialist RE Land Acknowledgement Statement Update. In the submission, we have the summary sheet, we have the updated land acknowledgement statement and the current land acknowledgement statement, as well as the information for why changes are being recommended. Are there any questions from any members of the committee? All right, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Yes, and I've already briefed Ms. Nowak on my questions, so I wonder if she could come up to the podium through the chair, and I'll ask those questions publicly. So the first one is a comment, and I appreciate Ms. Nowak that this the revised version is far more inclusive than perhaps the previous version was, and so I appreciate that. I am going to ask you in regards to repeating this statement at committee meetings, council meetings, hockey games, so forth. What positive impact, if any, do you believe that this is providing to our community? And the second question that I have is, what is the public's opinion of such statements? Are we getting positive traction out of this? Are we receiving complaints? Perhaps you can give us some insights.
Yeah, so we have a land acknowledgement statement, and because of that, we have our implementation plans. We have the MMIWG work plan. We have the reconciliation implementation plan. I can't speak on behalf of other organizations, but our statement states we acknowledge that we are on the lands, and therefore these are the actions that we are taking. That is the same message that I give other organizations when they ask me for assistance in their land acknowledgement statement or what it's supposed to mean. And I try and give the information of it's not about the land acknowledgement statement, it's about the actions that you're taking because you are acknowledging that you are on the lands of the Blackfoot people.
Okay, so are we finding that there is positive traction in this as opposed to comments from the public that may not be as positive?
I believe so. I believe that we are, you had just suggested, and I'm open to that as well, through the RLAC committee of doing a survey, if it is a public survey of if they would like to see this more, or if it's doing its job, so to speak?
Yeah, I think my personal opinions are less important than perhaps the public's personal opinions, and it may be an opportunity for RLAC to gain some action orientation. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Ms. Nowak, while we've got you here, can you explain exactly what we're changing?
We are changing the bottom portion of the land acknowledgement statement, as we are no longer under the Métis Region 3. And then just to be more inclusive to all Indigenous people living here, then we will acknowledge all Métis, because not all Métis are part of the Métis Association and such. So just to be more inclusive with everybody, we will change that little portion. And I mean, obviously, we're not part of the Métis Region 3 any longer, so it's null and void.
Okay, and this has already been through RLAC?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Carlson. You knew he was there.
So, I'm sure that was John. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. I recently attended some events with our local Métis leadership, and their recommendation to me, because I wasn't sure what I should say, there were some questions around that, and they talked about using the language around Lethbridge being part of the traditional Métis homeland. And I know this went to RLAC. Did it go to local Métis leadership as well? And I'm sorry if I couldn't find that in the report.
It did go to the Métis, and I had also spoken with Adam that day of the Métis flag raising, and he also agreed that it should be inclusive to all, and agreed with our statement.
Excellent. Thank you. Because yes, we quickly crafted some language on the day, and I wanted to make sure that it had been run by them. So thank you, appreciate it.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you. I'd just like to draw your attention to the statement that that RLAC has recommended. It says the City of Lethbridge offers respect to the Métis and all who have lived on the land and made Lethbridge their home. That's intentional, because it's very inclusive.
Yes.
That means me too.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I don't see anyone else in the question, so thank you very much. If you want to have a seat, we'll move on to the motion. I have a motion from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council, 1, rescind the June 10, 2019 resolution in its entirety adopted by City Council as follows. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council adopt the acknowledgement statement, see attachment 2, and further be it resolved that the acknowledgement statement be read at the beginning of all meetings of City Council. 2, approve the updated land acknowledgement statement as provided in attachment 1. And 3, a direct administration to update all City of Lethbridge online content and materials to reflect the change in the land acknowledgement statement, including the reconciliation implementation plan. Councillor, I can't talk anymore. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, we've heard that the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 has taken a look at this. They've approved this. And we also know that they've restructured their organization, which caused the Lethbridge Local to change its status, that the Métis Region 3 no longer exists to the area in which City of Lethbridge is situated. So this has been through RLAC. It's been approved by our Métis leadership, and it's an update to our current land acknowledgement statement. There's not much else to say on this. So if there's no further debate or questions, I will call for the vote on this.
Question has been called. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. Moving on now to policies. Yay, Mr. Matthews, Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer, are a Council Policy Priorities Update for Q2 Governance SPC. So we were given a slate of policies that various departments have gone through. These are ones that they are recommending no changes to. They're already approved, but we would move forward with just continuing with these policies. Are there any questions related to them? All right, I have a few, mostly because I like going through them. All right, so 1, CC 62, we just rescinded CC 45. So that one, we would just have to make sure that reference to CC 45 is removed from facility divestiture. Now, that was not done until after you brought this forward. CC 23, we have board mandate instead of broad mandate. If somebody could just correct the broad in there. I don't mind having board mandate. CC 05, it's one of the few of the early ones that doesn't have any statement about administrative policies to support this. Procurement, that's the procurement policy. I was just wondering if we should just have that added in there. And snow and ice, I don't think, again, we just made some recommended changes today that may have changed that one. So just kind of keep that one in your back pocket based on next spring. It may need to be changed, updated there. Those are the only ones I found as I was going through, and very small. I agree that these are all ones that we're going to continue to use, but there are just a few small things. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that you are a policy wonk. One thing that I would like to ask administration, just to, in terms of being considerate on this, rather than deluging us with, as council, a proliferation of policies to ponder, I'm wondering if we could have 2 or 3 at a time, which would give us perhaps more opportunity to receive them, to soak time, to have some discussions, maybe provide you with some questions. I find when we get a deluge of policies, they're not as perhaps as well reviewed, and maybe we could do it with a little bit more attention. We could maybe get through it a little bit more. I'm just speaking really for myself, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Milton Hope. We can definitely take a look into that if that's the direction that the SPC would like to go for. Well, this is our first bit, so just giving a little bit of background for committee members. Last year, in July, we hired our term technician to work through this. This is the first batch of ones coming through, so we're just doing a little bit of catch up, and this is why this one's so large. Some of the other ones that are coming forward later in this year, we could actually delay some of those a little bit to slow them down the amount, so that specifically some of the ones that we know that are probably where you want to spend a little bit more time, where council or the community or administration has highlighted some ideas. So if that's the will of the SPC, we definitely can do that.
Yeah, trickle rather than a fire hose would be great. Thank you.
I'm a little shocked you don't just have these memorized.
Well, I try, but my memory's fading.
Councillor Schmidt-Rempel.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Mr. Matthews, a couple of questions on these. CC 31, there's a statement that administration shall coordinate sport and recreation marketing. And that is under our sport and recreation policy with that. I'm just wondering if that's not something that has been transferred over to the Lethbridge Sport Council? Because I thought that was a duty that had been transferred over to them.
Thank you, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. That specifically, I'm not 100% sure on. We'll have to go and take a look at that and come back to you on that. So that could be something that's a legacy item in the policy that wasn't caught when we went through it. But we'll get back to you on that specific item.
Okay.
We'll take that one.
And then with CC 34, when we're looking at snow and ice control, now that we have special equipment to clear the bike lanes, I'm wondering if we should not be including under terms definitions, something about the bike lanes on there. Making sure those are included because they are now, they've got special equipment, they are specially cleared, if we shouldn't have something like that included in this policy with regards to those.
So I will pass it on to Mr. Sanchez here. It looks like he's itching to say something, so I will let him speak to this one.
Yes, so the plan is, since we are still on the phase 2 and the pilot project, the plan is once we get to the final state and we know exactly how things are going to be moving forward, this policy will be updated at that time to reflect all the changes that we're doing.
Okay, thank you very much on that. And then with CC 67, the honorariums for boards, committees, and commissions, I'd like to see that brought back when we're looking at the boards, committees, and commissions. Yeah, I'd like to see that policy brought back this fall with that review.
Thank you, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. We can definitely do that. We can tag it, and we'll include that with the package in there to come through at that time.
Yeah, just because we're doing a review of that, I think the policy review would be beneficial at that time too. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, but just to confirm, do you want to, again, I'm going to use the term reapprove. That's not really a word. Reaffirm is what Mr. Westerson did. That one now, or do you want to pull it from the list going forward to council?
I would pull that one from the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're okay? So we're going to recommend that CC 67 just be pulled at this time. All the other ones I noted are just small details that can probably be corrected before it goes to council, Mr. Westerson. So I have no problem with those going forward. Yeah. And snow and ice, it is the policy that's in place now as we're in the pilot project, and then that will be adapted after the pilot project, so we're okay with that one moving forward? Councillor Middleton Hope, you're okay with that one staying on 34?
Hunky-dory.
Okay. So we're only then going to remove CC 67 at this point. And I do have a motion then from Councillor Middleton Hope. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommend that City Council reaffirm the following policies as written. And I am just going to say the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 17, 22, 23. I feel like we're playing bingo. 27, 28, 30, 31, 33, 34, 36, 47, 51, 54, 55, 58, 59, 62, and 66. So that we all have the same list. Perfect. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate Mr. Matthews. The trickle effect as opposed to the fire hose would be great. Any other discussion in regards to this motion? No, thank you, Madam Chair.
All I want to say is, yay, thank you guys for getting this work done, because, I mean, it's been a long time since we've had time to work on them, so I greatly appreciate all the departments.
Excellent. Then, Madam Chair, we could call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Passes unanimously. And now we're staying on something similar. We are moving to amendments to the procedure bylaw 6250, of course, brought forward by Mr. Westerson. Essentially, what this is doing is if we were hiring people instead of recruiting volunteers and it took 6 months for them to be hired, you know, we would not be doing our job well. And this is essentially tightening up that entire process so it moves a lot faster, more effective and more efficient, better for council, better for those who are applying, and a better process overall. Councillor Middleton Hope, you have a question?
I have, and it's perhaps directed at Mr. Westerson, as he is the, I presume, well, I was going to say author, but we could use the term guru if you like. Mr. Westerson, so in regards to the procedure bylaw vis-a-vis the boards, committees, and commissions, I'm wondering if we are in the process that we're endeavoring here, are we sensitive to, just so that I'm clear here, the September to October is application time, October to November seems to be interview time, appointments December, and commencement in January. What about budget years, election years, conflicts, those kinds of things? Have we contemplated how that might have an impact on your process that you're putting forward?
Certainly, we've contemplated that, and something we encounter every year, regardless if we kind of speed this up or not. As we map through, we've already actually developed the preliminary schedule for 2025 around the 2025 municipal election, as an example. So we are looking ahead, noting that it will be extremely busy for council at that time, and any budget review timelines. The sensitivity with bringing this forward, try to amend, was in the interest of trying to, A, speed up that process, but B, being a little bit more, if you will use some of the terms previously, customer service centric, not letting our applicants wait 6, 7, 8 months in some instances. So,
okay, good. Thank you very much.
I don't see any other questions, so we will move then to the motion from Councillor Schmidt-Rempel. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommend that City Council, 1, provide first reading to Bylaw 6450, amendment to Procedure Bylaw 6250, at the July 9, 2024 meeting of council. And 2, consider second and third reading to bylaw 6450, amendment to procedure bylaw 6250 at the July 23, 2024 meeting of council. Councillor. Yeah, I know, I just went for councillor.
Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much, Mr. Westerson, for bringing this forward. Shorter recruitment timelines. Please vote for this. Yes.
Wow, she's passionate for this one.
I am passionate for this one. Yeah, I have nothing else.
Better for the residents and everybody.
Yeah.
All in favor? And that also goes forward unanimously. I'm a little concerned. We've been all unanimous all the way through. Touche. So this one, Councillor Middleton Hope, is yours because you have brought this back forward. This is the election signs with road right away. Is there anything you'd like to say with regards to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something that yourself and Councillor Carlson seem to be very passionate about some months ago. We really have no ending to it, so I'd like to at least bring it forward so that if we're going to kick it down the road, at least we don't lose sight of it. It doesn't fall down a drain somewhere, and at some point we have a robust discussion about whether this is something we want to move forward on or not.
Do you have any questions for any of the admin regarding it? Because Mr. Sarsfield has come down just for this.
Wow. Mr. Sarsfield, it's always fun to put you on the spot. Anything to say, Mr. Sarsfield? I didn't think so. Okay. So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if this is something that we can perhaps bring back either to this committee or, let's bring it back to this committee in another couple of months and allow members of this committee and others to kind of think about, okay, do we want to move forward with this? If we do, is there enough synergy to do it? If not, then let's let it die a natural death. But it's just kind of lingering.
Okay. So this was brought forward originally because people were not following the rules and causing staff time and effort during elections. We did hear from the public that removing election signs may inhibit some people's abilities to get their name known out there. I think that's pretty much the conversations we've had in the past. So if we re-refer it on to ourselves, it'd be the same conversation again, I would imagine. But Councillor Schmidt-Rempel?
No, I don't need any further information on this. My thoughts haven't changed around this.
And your thoughts are?
Some of the discussions we had is that are there other jurisdictions that this has been successfully implemented in? And Mr. Sarsfield, please correct me if I'm wrong, it hasn't been done in any other jurisdictions? Restricting the signs?
Mr. Sarsfield.
And maybe he's got updated information.
No. I do have updated information.
Yay.
The updated information is still no municipality has implemented this. There were several that were looking at doing it, but none of them took the lead.
Okay. And then to Mr. Faust, one of the questions we had to the city solicitor that was here when we discussed this was, could this be challenged on under the right of freedom of expression? And that was something that we had confirmed that it could be challenged.
That's correct. We can regulate all signs and placement, but we can't regulate content. And because this would be specifically political in elections, that's what would be putting us at risk. If you were to look at Calgary or Edmonton, they do just have sign bylaws which capture everything, but nothing specifically for election signs.
Specifically on this. Okay. One of the other questions we had was around the recycling of corrugated plastic, and we did learn from Mr. Sanchez at that time. Has the recycling program for corrugated plastic changed?
It's still the same status that we had before. It's hard to recycle material.
But we do have a program in place?
We do have a program in place. We can recycle it. It costs, but it's the same that we discussed last time.
Okay, and the only thing I would suggest is the next time we look at upping the fee for recycling the corrugated plastic to those of us who are running and using it. I don't need any further information. My vote on this will be the same as.
Okay. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Just a couple of comments. One of the other reasons, and I appreciate the observations from my colleagues, one of the other comments was the visual clutter that we got complaints about with umpteen signs along University Drive or Scenic Drive and so forth. And that was one of the other reasons why we kind of took a look at it. Mr. Sarsfield, while you're on the hot seat, are you satisfied that there is an appropriate alignment between federal, municipal, and provincial policy? It wasn't clear in reviewing the material that there was an appropriate alignment. So
there is. The alignment is.
And you're happy with it?
The alignment is the municipality decides what the policy is.
Okay.
So when you look at the provincial legislation regarding signs for election, they say follow the municipal. They actually have nothing in their guidelines or in the act regarding it. Same with federal. So whatever each municipality decides, that is what happens in that particular municipality. So what we do may be different than Calgary or Colehurst or Coaldale for that matter.
Excellent. Thank you. I now have my answers.
Okay. I'm getting the sense that this committee is recommending that this die on the vine. All right. Mr. Westerson, how does that happen? Do we just accept for information and does it die there? Or what would we have to do? Councillor Carlson would have to buzz in if he wants to be heard. I can't force him to speak.
You never need to do that.
To answer your question, Councillor.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, Councillor Carlson.
No, I had nothing to say. I was actually eating and had my mouth full when you referenced me. Personally, I guess maybe if you don't mind me asking one quick question.
Of course.
Like completely eliminating signs from our right-of-ways. I can see how people would think that would be maybe infringing on people's ability to get their name out. But have any municipalities just sort of put like designated sign areas and limited some? Like for me, one of the challenges is I hate them in our river valley, and I'm still finding them. That's the crazy part. And so would there be an ability or an interest to limit some of the areas where they could be placed?
Okay, Mr. Sarsfield, do you have any information on that which might help us? Or any of the administration? Is this something that no one's considered before?
We have considered it, and as part of our guidelines, and one of the rules, if you look at the guidelines, it says that no signs be on roads adjacent to parks. River Valley, for the most part, is considered to be a park or a nature reserve, so there would be no signs allowed there.
Okay, so it really does go back to, if you're going to put signs up, read and follow the rules.
Yeah, there's consequences.
So can I follow up on that?
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Scenic Drive borders our river valley. How does that apply?
That's a really good question. And when every time that we get a complaint about signs, there is some interpretation, but generally on Scenic Drive, they're allowed. So that would be answered. If I could just say one thing, even though I haven't been asked that question, I will.
Assume you've been asked it.
Okay, so we're not actually proposing to prohibit all signs. We're saying signs are still allowed on private property. So if someone who supports a specific candidate, they're welcome to put up a sign. And for those particular signs, there are no real rules surrounding it in terms of size or even when they're installed. So we're not actually prohibiting all signs. We're just, all that was suggested at one point was along public space.
And that actually became the difficulty in the earlier discussion, because there's research on whether or not signs on private property can swing and, can contribute to people, but nobody did research on public property, and that was one of the issues raised by people, is that we need some political scientists to go look at, signs on public property, because the private property has been researched, and it's a minimal amount, but there is an amount, and that therein lies the difficulty, is separating public and private.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Middleton Hope?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's actually a comment to my colleague, Councillor Carlson, and I know Jeff reads these presentations and submissions very, very carefully. I'm just wondering, Jeff, if the maps at the back of this presentation that preclude locations that can have signs, is that adequate in terms of your earlier question about knowing where areas were that would be prohibited?
Thanks, Councillor Middleton. No, my thought was to even, if any communities had done it even more strict, to say these are the two roads or the two sections of these roads are allowed, rather than just saying general guidelines. I was like, you want to have a free-for-all? Here's the areas to have the free-for-all. Please remove them from other areas. That was my only thoughts.
Okay, great, thank you.
Still requires following the rules, though. So I have had some recommendations from Mr. Westerson. One motion we could make, if we want this to die on the vine, for lack of a better term, is simply to make a motion that administration removes this from the status of directed resolutions. And then it is gone. Okay. Councillor Middleton Hope, this would be under your resolution. Are you fine with that resolution?
Yes.
Okay. It would still go forward to the consent agenda of the next meeting of council.
Yep.
And, anybody there could always pull it and debate it. I doubt anyone will, but that would be what would be happening.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the formal motion would be to recommend to council that this be removed from status of directed resolutions, or do director of administration, who actually does the work. So, okay, so it's council status. Okay, that it be removed from the status of directed resolutions. I'm sure you are madly typing that up, or it already is there. All right. We'll go to the question then. Everybody's fine with what's written? All in favor? All right. Excellent. And then we move on to the last one, government relations and advocacy update. Now, we do have some public information. We also have confidential item 7.1 here. Would it make most sense, Mr. Gauthier, just to go right into in-camera on this?
We can, if that's the wish of SPC. On the public one, there was probably only one item, but I neglected to include in that summary was the at the direction of council, there was the authorization for the intermunicipal lawlessness workshop, which also occurred on May 2nd. And so there was some administrative support provided to that, and also participation in the information sharing there as well.
Okay. But any questions we might have around the recommendation probably would be in close, so it might make most sense to move into close if anyone has questions that they think they need to ask in a close. No. I think these guys. Okay. That would mean any questions on the open recommendation then? All right. Well, so what the recommendation then is to hold a workshop for all members of council at the July 25th meeting of governance. So just for clarification, what time will that meeting be starting? And we need to, if we're going to move this forward, there would need to be an invitation out to those who are not on the committee. It's easy for us to say awesome because we will be there regardless. So normally we would be starting at 1:30 on that day. Are we recommending an earlier start? If you're bringing someone in, how long will they need? Just so we can make sure if this does move forward, that we can appropriately notify our colleagues.
I think so. I think we anticipate maybe, 30, depending on how long the discussion goes, maybe up to 45 minutes would suffice, I think. So if
Okay, so you're thinking an hour-ish. Mr. Westerson, I know you've got a view of that agenda coming up. Is that something that fits in our normal 3-hour time slot, or is this something that you think we need extra time for?
It very well could be within the your normal time slot. Keeping in mind the SPC begins at about 1:30 in the afternoon. Hearing that it's about a 45-minute session, it may be important to plan ahead and provide notice to lengthen the meeting if you wanted to start earlier. However, if we were to run late, that would be totally acceptable as is currently in our established procedure.
Okay.
Maybe I can just add to that. I think the intent is it's an invitation to all members of council. It's certainly up to each individual council member as to whether they attend.
Of course, anything, right? They can come to any SPC regardless, but we'll make sure that they are aware that that is occurring. And is there any homework that any members of council would need to do in advance of that?
No, I don't believe so. And it would be facilitated.
All right. All right, Councillor Middleton Hope.
I'm just wondering, are we proposing Mr. Westerson to tack this on to the end of governance?
I would recommend the beginning so the others can leave if they choose.
At the beginning?
At the will of SPC, if it was at the beginning at the 1:30 session or at the end.
We're satisfied we can get all business from governance as well as this workshop in the, 3 hours, 3.5 hours?
I wouldn't mind going in camera. We'll put this one. Sorry, yes.
You had a sidebar,
That
I
is
saw
the suggestion
that.
being made. But I am actually going to move myself that we do go close, because just as I'm thinking, there's a couple questions I wouldn't mind asking.
Fair enough.
All right. So we are going to move into closed session. That was a vote there.
Sure.
A sure enough vote? Yes. this last motion and then lives, or get ready for your next event at 5:30. I'm photographing groceries. Oh, and Gerald, just kind of off topic, you will let Jody know to get it into everybody's calendars, or at least an invite? We'll mention it to them as well, but they listen to Jody more than us. I should have ran and got water a long time ago. No, I'm good.
Why didn't you say something?
No. Oh.
Blaine and I keep
Oh, thank you. That's why I couldn't say anybody's name. I was like, oh my God.
no, just Blaine and I keep extras for the two of us.
Perfect.
Because we know one of us will need one.
All right. Excellent.
He always brings some
Now
down.
I can talk again.
Yeah, he always brings some down, or I always bring some down. We make sure we've got them because on more than one occasion it's been need one.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing. All right. Sorry for keeping everybody 20 minutes longer than they did pretty well.
We did really well considering that agenda.
Oh, God, I couldn't have. Okay, everybody, now we're open again. So we are back to our final motion coming out of 6.5, Government Relations and Advocacy Update. Be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommends that City Council approve the recommendations to hold a closed workshop for all members of City Council at the July 25th, 2024 Governance Standing Policy Committee at 12:30 p.m. as part of the meeting of the Governance Standing Policy Committee to coordinate and prepare for upcoming council advocacy opportunities for the remainder of 2024. And further be it resolved, the City Council direct that the closed meeting reports, documents, and discussions with respect to the Government Relations and Advocacy Update, I'll just do that the other way around, remain confidential pursuant to sections 21, harmful to intergovernmental relations, and 24, advice from officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be it resolved that the Governance Standing Policy Committee recommends City Council direct administration to proceed with the confidential direction provided in the closed session. Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, that one's yours.
Thank you very much. I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Oh, he's over there. Did he vote in favor?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're adjourned. Run, people, run. And thank you all for a great meeting today and for getting us through all that. Excellent.